ONNtv. My name is Lynne Brown, and today we're going to take a little diversion from some of our regular programming. This happens to be the World Council of Churches Week for a Peace and Just Palestine and Israel. So it's a week that over 350 different denominations come together to reflect on the work that's being done in the past and looking at what can be done to move forward to create a lasting peace in Palestine and Israel. I'm very blessed to have with us today two incredible speakers. One is Jonathan Kuttab. Jonathan is an international human rights lawyer. He was schooled in the United States, and in fact, last year was the guest lecturer at Osgoode School of Law in Toronto. My other guest is Karen Rodman. Karen has just returned from Palestine about a month ago with her daughter. Karen and her daughter participated in the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program, which seeks to take people to make observations and report back, kind of monitor the situation in Palestine. So welcome to ONNtv, to Jonathan and Karen, and thank you for being part of us, a part of our program today.
My pleasure.
So Jonathan, can I start with you? Jonathan, talk to me about the work that you do and the really important work that is being done in the legal scale, in the legal world, to create a lasting peace in Palestine and Israel.
Well, it's interesting, but law by its very nature has an element of justice and equality. It allows analysis and go back to just basic, especially when you speak about international law or humanitarian law, when you speak about human rights. It doesn't matter who is the perpetrator and who is the victim. These are principles that, in theory, apply to one and all. So it becomes a very useful tool if you're working for peace, if you're working for justice, if you're working for reconciliation. It becomes a very useful tool. If you're just interested in defeating the other side, then you don't need law. You just need a bigger gun or a bigger weapon. So law becomes a part of the weapons of light against the forces.
Right. Yes, the legal channels become an avenue that can be explored for creating peace. So Karen, talk to me about the work that you did in Palestine. What are some of the things that you saw as you were moving forward in some of the days in Palestine? Some of the things that you shared with me was when you watch the young children trying to go to school, like there's some real specific things that the young people are challenged to do in their daily lives there.
For sure. Thanks, Lynn. So yes, in 2014, I was part of the World Council of Churches Ecumenical Accompaniment Program and had the privilege and honor to be with Palestinians who were trying to get to their own farmland that had been put on the opposite side of the wall when the illegal wall was built in the turn of this century, to be with families, to take documentation when their children had been arrested in night raids, to be in communities when access had been cut off to those communities when house demolitions had occurred, illegal house demolitions. More recently, I have been in Palestine about 4 months out of the last 6 or so, and had the privilege, as you mentioned, to be there for 3 of those with my daughter, Michaela Levis. So during that time, I guess we were not with a particular program, but we're working to do advocacy work with a number of different groups, and also to look at the possibility of also helping with economic development by hopefully being able to bring more unique and distinct Palestinian products into Canada as well. So a number of projects, but what I saw, what we saw, was how quickly things are happening at this point.
Okay.
No surprise, but certainly with the timing with the Trump government and
Hmm.
the announcement of the embassy the U.S. embassy being put into Jerusalem last December, that happening, I think, in February. Things are moving very, very quickly, and things are very, very grave in Gaza. I, of course, did not
Right.
get into Gaza, but it was not unusual to be hearing warplanes, F-16s
Right.
overhead in the occupied territory and elsewhere in communities like Acre or Haifa or other places in the state of Israel. So yeah, I mean, it's just things are moving very, very quickly. Yeah, a new trend seems to be, and the numbers would show that that not only would be children being arrested, but children being actually shot, both in
Right.
Gaza during the peaceful marches for the Great March of Return, and also in night raids where the Israeli soldiers would come in, the military would come into communities, into refugee camps. One young boy, 14, was killed on the street in Bethlehem while we were there, and so it's that kind of thing, Lynn. It's yeah,
Hmm.
and Jonathan can speak much more to it, but that's the piece that I would bring back for me, and also through the eyes of my daughter too, which was.
Right. Yes. Yes. And it's interesting because the World Council of Churches theme this year is youth and children raising hope and making change. So when we come back, we're just going to take a quick break. And when we come back, let's talk some more about that. And let's also explore the BDS movement and how that can be a sort of a boots on the ground kind of way, grassroots way for folks to support a lasting peace and in Palestine and Israel. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to ONNtv. My name is Lynne Brown. We are here today to reflect on the call by the World Council of Churches to think about and discern about Palestine and Israel, and what can we do to bring a lasting peace and justice in the region of Palestine and Israel. So we're talking with Karen Rodman and Jonathan Kuttab. So Jonathan, let me go with you here. Can you talk to me about some of the things that you're doing now to promote that lasting peace and justice? And I understand that you are on a tour at the moment.
Correct. I will be doing a tour in Canada, speaking at different places about the prospects of peace and reconciliation, about a new vision for the future, as well as about the current human rights situation in occupied territories. You mentioned prisons and prisoners and the Mandela Institute.
Right.
And of course, prisons are only one small part of the variety of violations that the Palestinians are undertaken. And when you speak about prisoners, there's basically three things to be kept in mind. Number one, the very large number of people who actually do end up in prison at one time. As much as 20 or 30% of the adult male population has been in jail at one time or another.
Wow.
Secondly, there's administrative detention, which means people can be put in prison for 6 months, renewable repeatedly, without being told why. No charges, no trial, administrative detention. Currently, there's about 500 or 600 people under administrative detention, but everyone is subject to that. You can be arrested, no charges, no trial.
Wow, that's an extraordinary number of people.
It is. It's a very high number of people. Third is the manner in which people get arrested. Usually the arrests occur after midnight. They come in, terrorize a population, pull somebody up, blindfold them, sometimes by beating, just 2 days and knowing why. So when we started Mandela Institute, actually it was a biblical reference to it, because Jesus says, I was in prison and you visited. So I felt it was important for us to set up an organization whose job is to visit the prison. There's very little we can do to help them, obviously, and legally there's very little we can do because it's all under military law. But at least we can visit them, bring word from them to their families, their
Wow.
social work, rather than
Oh, it's very arbitrary. It's a very arbitrary way to live, and it's a difficult way to live, especially for the young children. Watching a child being arrested, being detained, and watching your family be dismantled like that is a long-lasting trauma. And so how do we help to protect the children? Where do we go for these children? How do we make this peace? How do we support a lasting peace in Palestine for the children? Karen,
Well,
do you have a thought on that? Or sorry,
yeah,
Jonathan, go
there
ahead.
was a campaign called No Way to Treat a Child that took place in Canada and even in the United States. There's even legislation in the United States to try and prevent U.S. aid money going to abuses for the rights of children. And the idea is that we understand some people need to go to jail sometimes, but there's no justification after 50 years of military occupation to use military court system against Palestinians, especially against children. So
Right.
we can ask for something very modest, like stop using military courts against children, stop administrative detentions, stop midnight arrests,
Yes.
and use the proper procedures that everybody expects when you think about law and a legal system. Let's put a little bit of justice, a little bit of morality, a little bit of normalcy into what is clearly a very abusive system.
Right, right. Karen, go
sorry,
ahead.
I was just going to say, if I could, on the No Way to Treat a Child campaign, Lynn, here in Canada, there were about almost 20 MPs, I think 18 MP members of Parliament from all 5 parties that were in Palestine this past spring. And following that, I believe about 20 MPs in total have signed a letter calling for the Canadian government to take action, just as Jonathan has described, to condemn the torture and the illegal treatments of children. So certainly one way that's very concrete is for people to talk to their own elected members of Parliament, check out the No Way to Treat a Child link, and to move forward with that campaign here in Canada as well.
Okay, and then the other way that we're going to talk about is the boycott, divestment, and sanctions, BDS. And the BDS movement has really gained momentum, especially with some of the musicians that have been refusing to hold concerts in Israel when they learn more about what's been going on. So do you think that the BDS movement is a way for people to champion a lasting peace in Palestine and Israel? So I'll go to you, Jonathan.
Yeah. The most beautiful thing about BDS is that it's a non-violent movement. It's a way to use a non-violent way, because the Palestinian-Israeli problem sometimes is very emotional, and there are people who hold very strong opinions and who have very good friends on both sides of the fence. But when we talk about using non-violent means, we are talking about allowing people to participate in bringing about a better conclusion, not by fighting and killing and shooting and violence, but by trying to hold people to international standards, to human rights, and by trying to create sanctions and boycotting, not participating in a process that is clearly evil and that is clearly abusive of people. And that's part of the mission, I think, of the church, is to find ways that ordinary Christians, ordinary people, can participate on the right side of history, can participate towards a good solution, can participate without hurting or destroying or killing even those who are doing abusive things.
Okay. Now, Jonathan, where will you be speaking next? Where can people look for your to join on to come to one of your lectures?
Karen can answer that. She is the one who is in charge of the
Karen.
Well, we have Jonathan on the East Coast in Nova Scotia and in Newfoundland, and then we have him in the West Coast, in Vancouver in the Lower Mainland, and over across Vancouver Island, and into Victoria, and then here in Ontario, Niagara Falls, Stratford, Toronto, and some other locations. And I'm sure that we will look to a time to go for a road trip up through Sault Ste. Marie and Thunder Bay. And there's a lot of interest from our friends in the West as well. So I expect we'll be doing that, and also in Quebec. So certainly we will. I mean, as Jonathan said, a real focus on holding our own government accountable, and helping and working with people with concrete actions. And under international law, Canada is accountable under Article 1 of the 4th Geneva Convention to ensure that when there is a time of occupation or a time of war, that those rules that have been put in place under that 4th Geneva Convention are always upheld. So Canada has international accountability as a signator. I hope I've got that right, Jonathan. But
Karen, could you tell people where to go to find out where I'll be speaking and when?
Yes, I'll post a link to all of that. Yes, absolutely. I'll post a link to all of that with our
definitely. The other thing is that we do have a domestic law as well that actually puts there's 22 countries that are sanctioned by Canada, by the government of Canada. 10 of them are ones that the UN does, and that Canada does through its UN Act. But there also are another dozen or so through the Emergency Measures Economic Measures Act, and there are some criteria. One of them is systemic human right violations, and so in that sense, we want to talk to people, because we know through the survey a year ago that was done here in Canada, 70% of people in Canada support sanctions related. Or around that number, depending which question you look at. So, justpeaceadvocates.ca and jonathankuttab.org has all of that information, both.
Well, thank you so much. Do you have any last thoughts, Jonathan?
Yes, I really want to try and move beyond what is usually a very contentious problem, because many people feel that Jewish people have suffered in the past, and we have to be careful to point out when anti-Semitism exists that it is wrong. But at the same time, we have to recognize that there are human beings on the other side, Palestinians, who are also made in the image of God, and who really deserve the same level of concern for their rights and for their ability to live a normal life. Sometimes people think it's too confusing, it's too complex.
It's too big of
a clear. Human rights are clear. Torture is clear. Administrative detention is clear. Taking somebody's land and building settlements on it that are for Jews only is clear. There are some issues on which people of goodwill from all sides can agree to move things forward towards a better position. Violence is not good. Weapons are not good. We don't need more weapons. The Israelis don't need more weapons. We need a better path towards peace than what we have seen so far. That is why BDS becomes a very useful and an important tool, precisely because it provides an avenue for people to deal non-violently with what's otherwise a very violent confrontation.
Thank you so much for everything that you've shared, and for giving us the chance to reflect on this very important week for peace in Palestine and Israel. And when I was a child, I remember Granny Smith apples becoming a very polarizing issue when we started learning that it was, in fact, something that was supporting apartheid in South Africa. And it's interesting that you have called your foundation after Mandela, because that was one of the polarizing issues that I learned about when I was a child going to school. So thank you so very much to the two of you for participating in this today. And BDS and sanctions, it is a way for us to choose to advocate for peace and justice in Palestine and Israel. So thank you. Good luck with the tour, and we'll be watching for you to come through Northern Ontario.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Lynn. Many blessings.
Me to you, Karen. Thank you. Goodbye, Jonathan.